Last time out for our early SEC prediction show, we found ourselves in Oxford, Mississippi. It's time to travel about 2 hours south in Mississippi to Starkville for Mississippi State's early SEC predictions. And this is going to be a good one, just like every other single one. By the way, if you guys haven't already known, I'm doing this in alphabetical order for every single team. So we did Mississippi last year, or Ole Miss as you want to call them. We have done every single team from Alabama all the way now down to Mississippi State. Then we got after this Missouri, South Carolina, Texas A&M, and finishing off with Vanderbilt. So if you love SEC football, if you love college football, do me a favor, hit that like button down below right now and hit that subscribe button because there are tons of videos that you're going to not want to miss. And if you haven't seen the other ones, don't worry, there is a playlist available where you can watch every single one for whatever team you want. In the SEC, you can watch their early prediction show. So let's get into it. Mississippi State Bulldogs. Before we get into talking about 2021, we have to take a look back at 2020, which was, I don't want to say it was a roller coaster. It kind of was, but it was more, you know how when roller coasters start, you go up really high. It's usually the first big drop. You go up really, really high, and then all of a sudden you find yourself just going straight down, and you usually stay low for the rest of the ride. That's kind of what Mississippi State did this season. Although I guess you could say that at the end of the season, you had a little hump where you kind of went back up and you kind of like stayed at the top for a bit. But it was not nowhere near as tall as where you were at the beginning of the season. Because we all know the LSU game, the first CBS game of the season, that was one that I watched. That was unbelievable. Everyone was through the roof about Mississippi State, and I'm guilty of that. I made a video after that game talking about, is Mississippi State a possible playoff team? Leach brings the air raid to Mississippi State, goes in, and it works against LSU, the defending national champions, the sixth best team in the nation. And Mississippi State just ran over that defense. You had KJ Costello throwing for 623 yards. Your leading rusher was Kylan Hill. He had 34 yards in that game. But who cares? It's the air raid. Osiris Mitchell had 183 yards receiving in that game. The passing attack killed LSU in that game. And I just remember watching that in absolute disbelief. Mississippi State, I think, found themselves the next week as the 16th best team in the country after that. But then it was a loss to Arkansas, a loss to Kentucky, a loss to Texas A&M, a loss to Alabama. Then you beat Vanderbilt, but only beating them by 7 points. And I'm pretty sure that game was at home too. Beating Vanderbilt by only 7 points is not a good look for your team at all. Here you go. You lose to Georgia. You lose to Ole Miss in your rivalry game. You lose to Auburn. You finish the season out with a win against Missouri, though. So you finish out the regular season with a win against Missouri, who Missouri was actually a pretty good football team this season. And then you finish the season out in total with a bowl win against Tulsa in the whole. I remember watching that game. I picked Mississippi State to win that game. And where was it? Was that the Duke's Mayo Bowl? I can't remember. It was the Armed Forces Bowl against Tulsa. Tulsa was a ranked team, and we all know the big brawl at the end of the season. So it was that big drop. We go up, massive drop, stay low for the rest of the season, and then you kind of have that little last hump to finish out the year. So Mississippi State finished the season better than how, I don't want to say better than how they started it, because they started out with a bang, but better than how the rest of the season went, because Mississippi State found themselves as the last team in the SEC West, where I thought it was Arkansas's division to lose for sure. But Arkansas was actually a pretty good team this year. You had Ole Miss being a really surprising team. Auburn and LSU were disappointing, although they were still able to do relatively well compared to a team that being in the middle of your division when you're regularly low is good. So Mississippi State finished the season off, I think, 4-7. They had the 4 wins. They beat LSU, obviously, Vanderbilt, Missouri, and then Tulsa to finish off the season. But it was, from what happened the first game, it was a disappointing season. It was a disappointing season for how the first game went, because we were really, really high on this team going in. So now we got to take a look at Mississippi State's 2021 schedule. Let's take a look at who they are playing this season. Starting off on September the 4th, the first Saturday of the season, you take on the Louisiana Tech. What are they? The Bulldogs. So you're going Bulldogs versus Bulldogs. Then you stay at home September 11th to play the NC State Wolfpack. Then you go to Memphis. Memphis is a pretty decent team, actually. You go to Memphis on the 18th. Then you're at home against LSU on the 25th. Then starting off October, you're away in Texas A&M. Then you got on the 9th, you have your bye. So a bit of an early bye week compared to what most teams have this season. Then you go at home versus Alabama, so you get that bye right before the big Alabama game. You go to Vanderbilt on October the 23rd. Then you come back home for Kentucky on the 30th. Then you got a dual away trip. You got 2 games away, starting off with Arkansas on November the 6th and then finishing off with Auburn on the 13th. You come back home to take on Tennessee State. And then you finish off the season at home versus your rival in the Egg Bowl, Ole Miss, on the November the 27th. And then I put this in there for every single team. SEC Championship is on December 4th. Who knows if Ole Miss can make it there? I don't think that they're expected to make it there this season, but we have no clue what can happen this season, because if the season was anything like last year, we are in for a crazy, crazy season of up and downs for many, many, many different teams. So it's unexpected for Mississippi State to get to that point, but still, who knows? Who knows? Now let's take a look at some of the losses and gains from Mississippi State this season, because they have lost some good players. They lost a bunch of good guys on this team that is going to affect how Mississippi State plays, but they're also keeping some players, and they brought in a decent recruiting class. So we're going to go into that all right now. You look at the guys that they lost on this defense. First of all, you lose Thompson, you lose Jones, you lose Murphy, you lose Spencer. Those are going to be all big guys that you're losing on your defense. So the defensive line, especially the edges, you're losing some big name players there and guys who were key for your defense last season. Offensively, in my opinion, is where you find the biggest drop-off. You're losing Kylan Hill, who's one of the most underused players in all of college football for his talent. Yes, you play in an air raid attack, but Kylan Hill in the rushing game, he's going to be, in my opinion, a steal in the draft because his stock is not high at all, but he's a really good player, and some team's going to pick him up and find a really good player in Kylan Hill. And then Osiris Mitchell, the leading receiver for Mississippi State last season. Those are your 2 big offensive guys that you're losing, and then you're also losing Parker on the offensive line. But you look at the guys that you're losing, or that you're bringing back, the seniors that could have gone to the draft this season. They were eligible, but they come back. You're going to have an experienced O-line. You're bringing back Lashley and Sharp to your offensive line, which is going to be huge. Experience always builds a good offensive line. Yes, talent does. You can still have some really good young offensive linemen, but experience really helps you with your offensive line. So that's going to be huge for them. You got 2 DBs coming back in Peters and Morgan. So your secondary is going to be very experienced for Mississippi State this season, and I think all in all, this team's going to be pretty good. Taking a look at what we're going to kind of see for a lineup for Mississippi State going into this season. Quarterback, I think it's going to be Will Rogers still. Like, he finished off the season last year after KJ went from the high of throwing 600 plus yards against LSU to the lows of just throwing pick after pick after pick. In that Arkansas game, I'm pretty sure he threw tons and tons, or maybe that was Ole Miss who threw the bunch, and who cares? KJ Costello threw way too many picks. Will Rogers is going to be your quarterback. You're going to have Marks at running back, and then at the wide receiver position, Wally's going to be your main guy, and then you're going to have Heath, Payton, and Williams leading up behind him. So the offense, I think, is actually going to be pretty decent. It's not going to be as good as it was at points last season, but I think that there is still talent on this team, and there's still some consistency that you could find in this Mississippi State offense. Moving on to defense. Defense is where you're going to find the holes, in my opinion. Again, I said it, with all the players that you're losing, the defensive line is going to take a big hit. The defense in total is going to take a big hit, and this was a defense that did not play well by any means last year. They let up a lot of points. They gave up a lot of points, losing those big guys like you had Thompson and you had Spencer and you had Kobe Jones, and all those guys that you're losing on this defense is really going to hurt. So how is Mississippi State going to be able to reload? Let's take a look at their recruiting class this season. Who they brought in, because what were they? They were 9th, I think, in the SEC. Right now, they're currently 9th in the SEC for the recruiting class, which is higher than I would have expected. You're beating Auburn, you're beating Kentucky, you're beating South Carolina, you're beating Vanderbilt. So those are the 4 teams that you're beating right now. I think I'm missing one. And Missouri. Missouri's the last team. So you're not. That's better than I would have expected. Mississippi State players might think different, or fans might think differently, but that's better than I expected. You brought in, I think it was like three 4-stars to this team. So who do you got? You got Sawyer Robertson as your pro-style quarterback, 10th best in the nation. And then you got an outside linebacker in John Lewis, 14th best outside linebacker in the nation, coming from Madison, Mississippi. And then finishing off with Theodore Knox, 39th best wide receiver in his class, and he is a 4-star. So those are your 3 big 4-stars. Just going through some of the 3-stars that you have after him. Oh, I was wrong. Yeah, you have 4 4-stars. Finishing it off with Antonio Hartman, wide receiver, 47th best wide receiver in his class. So you're bringing in 2 4-star wide receivers, 1 4-star quarterback, and then 1 4-star outside linebacker. There's no 5-stars. I don't think that we expected Mississippi State to get any 5-stars this season, but still, to bring in any 4-stars, especially as a South Carolina fan that I am, bringing in any 4-stars, having one 4-star in your class sounds really, really good to me right now. So Mississippi State, they're bringing in a decent recruiting class, not necessarily the players that they need. I think that they're pretty good at wide receiver right now, in my opinion. Quarterback, it's always good to just have guys under, and especially highly recruited guys under, just in case something happens and Will Rogers doesn't play as good as we expected him to this season. But the outside linebacker, that's really going to help, especially the line that just took a bunch of hits. So that's going to be your big help. But they loaded up pretty decently. Like, Mississippi State brought in a pretty decent class. Now we're getting to the part that everyone comes for, the part that you're watching this whole video for: wins, toss-ups, and losses. How Mississippi State will do this season and how I have them categorized for each game. Let's get into that. So wins, toss-ups, losses, you have to take into account the numbers at the bottom. I make this very clear in every single video I do for these because people do not understand. Listen to what I say. Please listen to what I say. Don't look at the image and cancel out of the video. Listen to what I have to say. So let's start off with the wins. By the way, the percentages at the bottom, win confidence I'd have in Mississippi State for this game right now. It's either going to be, so for wins, I'm going to have 100% to 75% win confidence in them. Toss-ups, I'm going to have 74 to 26 win percentage confidence in them. And then finally, the losses, I'm going to have 25 under confidence in them winning that game. So starting off with the wins, I think Louisiana Tech, your first game of the season, is an automatic win. I think that Vanderbilt's going to be an automatic win, and I think that Tennessee State will be an automatic win. The toss-ups, North Carolina State was actually a pretty good team this year. They found themselves ranked at some pretty big parts of the season, so especially later on towards the season, I think they're ranked going into their bowl game. So NC State, yes, you have that game at home, but that is definitely not a write-off. The win confidence I'd have in Mississippi State right now, in North Carolina State's a ACC team. I do not rank any ACC team high at all, so I'd say 60-40 for Mississippi State in that game. Memphis is a game that I cannot call right now. I don't know Memphis well enough, but they're a group of 5 team who constantly finds themselves at the top of the AAC, which is the most premier group of 5 conference that there is. And you go to the Liberty Bowl in Memphis. So that could be a game that it could be a true 50-50 toss-up. I have no right to call that game yet because I think Memphis could be a really good team. Kentucky's a team that is always off and on. Some years they're really good, some years they're not. You have Kentucky at home. That's a game that I cannot call right off right now. And then finishing off with Ole Miss, I have Ole Miss winning this game. I have them at like literally 70% confidence in this game, but it's a what is it? It's a rivalry game. It's the Egg Bowl, and you're in Mississippi State. That's not a game that I could count as a write-off right now, but I do have more confidence in Ole Miss winning that game 100% than I do Mississippi State. The losses: LSU, Texas A&M, Alabama, Arkansas, and Auburn. So I think it's fair to say Alabama and Texas A&M are very reasonable. You go to Texas A&M, and you got Alabama at home, but Alabama's going to be the best team in the SEC this year. LSU, I think that LSU is still going to be really tough. Even though you beat them last year, LSU is going to be a really tough win. They got a lot of talent on that roster, and I think that they're going to utilize it very well this year. Arkansas is questionable, especially Mississippi State fans will be like, why the heck is Arkansas on there? Arkansas is a terrible team. You go to Arkansas, and I think Arkansas is going to be one of the better and most surprising teams yet again in the SEC this season. I'm pretty high on Arkansas this season. And then Auburn's always a good team. Like, they're decent. Like, yes, last year they didn't have the greatest season ever, but they're going to be decent. You go to Jordan-Hare Stadium, so I do not have enough confidence in Mississippi State to win that game to put them in that toss-up category, that Auburn game. Best case scenario, worst case scenario, and let's go realistic. So best case scenario, I think you go 6-6 for Mississippi State. I honestly look at this schedule and be like, yeah, that might be the best. 7-5 is punching through the roof. Like, that's what I call it, where you have like your best case scenario, your highest ceiling, and then punching through that ceiling. 7-5 is the best case scenario for Mississippi State, in my opinion. Worst case scenario, I think you take all 3 of your wins, and I'll say you win one of your toss-up games. You'll take at least one of those, which will put you at 4-8, and then realistic for Mississippi State this season. What should we go with here? You take your 3 wins, I think you split your toss-up games, and then you lose all your losses. So that would put you at 5-7 as a realistic record for Mississippi State, in my opinion. So thank you so much for watching this video, guys. I know Mississippi State fans, it might not be what you expected, but I'm just an outsider looking in. I'm a South Carolina fan. I wouldn't say that I cover Mississippi State the outmost, but just looking in, this is just so you guys see, like, my opinion is not going to affect how Mississippi State plays at all this season. This is just a fan of the SEC looking into all the different programs and seeing it through my lens. And you guys are just interested to see how the rest of the SEC looks at your specific team. So thank you so much for watching this video, guys. Like the video down below, comment anything about college football or SEC football, and definitely come back next time.